Hey there, and welcome to the crashiest crash course on InDesign you're likely ever to have. So let's just go step by step, and if you follow me, you'll be doing a pretty good job. So go ahead and start Premiere. Hit Create New. What we're going to do is sort of like the example I linked you to, but it's going to be a magazine spread. A spread is 2 pages put together. So this is a page, this is a spread, or let's see if I have a book around. You probably get the idea without the illustration, but this is a page, but these two are a spread. The reason that that's an important thing, especially in magazine publishing, is sometimes the image takes up both pages, or sometimes sometimes you just can't comprehend the material very well when you just look one page at a time. And in a novel, it's no problem. You just read a page, you read another page. But when you're talking about things that are a little more designed out graphically, then it becomes a little bit more important to look at them as a spread. So, you know what? Actually, let's look at that link that I sent you, but I'll open it here in Premiere. See, I have it set so you can view it as a spread. So the cover alone will look like that. Open it, one page looks like that. Now imagine if you just looked at it with just the left side, it would just be a woman with a computer. Then over here, it would look like a dude who's halfway cut off and then a bunch of words. When you see it together, you realize, oh, it's all one contiguous picture. These probably could stand alone. These definitely could not, right? You have to look at this as a spread, or else it just won't make any sense. The back cover actually is also a spread with the front cover. You'll get that a lot with books also. Like, for example, here, you can see that there's an illustration of something like, I don't know what those are, fields with tire tracks. And then along the spine of the book, you have the same, you can't really see it well with this camera, but then in the back, you also have those fields. See, along the spine, the field. So this is actually all one. That's also important to be a spread, right? So that's what we're going to be doing here. So let's go to, I'll just close this. Oops. Create new. And we went over this briefly with Illustrator, but does anybody recall the dimensions of your typical magazine? It's about the same size as a piece of notebook paper. And we're not using picas. If yours says picas, change it to inches. So it's 8.5 by 11, which actually looks like it's set to be my default. 8.5 by 11. But here's the trick. Just like in Illustrator, we don't want it to be just 8.5 by 11 because we need some bleeds. Whenever you do a good publication, it's very likely that you'll want to print to the edge. Taking this random book here again, but it's printed right to the edge. There's no margin there. You know, there's no little white space along the edges like your typical desktop printer will require you to make on your Word documents. This will print right to the edge. It takes a special process. Actually, they print it slightly larger, and then they have a machine for cutting it to so they're not actually printing on this size of paper. It's bigger. Then they cut it. So we're gonna print this picture, or we're gonna print all of our designs a little bit bigger. So let's go down to margins, and this is actually not a real thing that exists. It's actually just a line on your page. Usually I like to have 1/4 inch margins. It just kind of tells you a little bit like, hey, if you have that little line there, you're getting close to the edge, so keep your stuff in a little bit. Words anyway, important stuff. Just to make sure that if you try to print small words really close to the edge, then you run a real risk of the printer not hitting the guides quite right, and they might just chop your word in half. You don't want that. So you want to keep everything important, like words, especially if they're small, in a little bit. Probably if it's big print, like vanity, the top of vanity. I think, get out of here. I think that they often print the name of their magazine right to the edge of the top of their magazine, but that's because they're really big words. If you cut off, a little 1/8 of an inch off of the giant V, you can still tell it's a giant V. So we're going to go a 1/4 inch margin, but here's the important one: bleed and slug. Let's see. Slug is a little So a slug is an area outside of the page that a lot of times printers would like to see you include, where you can put instructions. So you remember how I said that they print the pictures and the designs a little bit bigger than the area they're going to cut. If it's 8.5 by 11, well, sometimes they'll have a good like inch at the bottom or inch at the top, inch on the side, where they can print direction. You can put like notes to the printer or things like that. But if they want a slug, you have that option, but you want to talk to your printer first. So we're not going to use one because we're not printing this. Bleed, though, I'd like you to get in the habit of creating a bleed, because there's always going to be a bleed. Unless you're doing like a Microsoft Word document, which we're not. This is much nicer than that. So let's give it a 1/4 inch bleed, and that's very typical, a 1/4 inch. So let's see. Oh, you know what? It looks like maybe I set it as the default, but it's already default here, a 1/4 inch. This little link thingy means that if you do 1/4 inch on one, it'll be 1/4 inch on all of them. I'm not doing any slugs because I'm not sending this to the printer. And even if you were sending to the printer, only include it if they want it, or if they, can you put the instructions in the slug? Oh, sure. Then you want to give like an extra inch and then, create a little box for directions at the top. Anyway, we're going to hit create. Oh, you know what? I think I forgot to mention that you could choose how many pages you want. So let's go back because we don't want that many pages. I'm going to go back to create new. Change it back to inches. Just keep the orientation vertical, because magazines, you typically don't read that way. 8 pages. Okay, so we don't want that many. We want a cover and 2 inside pages for this project. So how many pages is that? Well, there's the cover, the inside cover, the next page, the back cover, 4. So let's go with 4. We're going to start the whole booklet at page 1, which makes sense, but you actually don't always want that. Let's see. I think everything else is good. Oh, columns. You don't always have to view these. You can turn these off, but it'll come. InDesign will create these little lines that don't actually print. They're just for you, the designer, to look at. But it creates columns on the page in case you're, say, in newspaper design. You know how they're always in nice little tidy, neat columns? Well, that's because the designer who lays them out has little rectangular boxes for text. And then, so we're going to go with 3 columns. And then a gutter is the space between the columns. So the letters are not just, the columns are not just butting up, because the letters would bump into each other, right? So we need a little space. And this space is like default. It's like 1/8 of an inch. Now we can, honest this time, now we can hit create. Okay, there we go. So you're going to see that this red line is the end of the bleed. This white box is the actual page. So when we design this, we should design all our illustrations, all our graphics out to the red line, because that's the bleed. Anything else that goes outside there, well, that's fine, but it might not even make it on the page, and that's good because it's getting cut. Then these little boxes in here, these are our columns. Right. So we have here page 1. If we scroll down, we have our spread, inside spread. Here's the inside. So here's the cover, the first page. Here's the inside cover, and the next page, and the back cover. Right. So let's start with this. Let's start with the spread. So we're going to ignore the cover for now. Now we're going to go ahead and just find some text online. Now you can find a newspaper report, a magazine article, a blog, but find some piece of content, some written content. It can be whatever, because this is for educational purposes, so we don't need to worry about plagiarism or anything. So you can just grab some content and just paste it somewhere in here. Yeah. So go ahead and hit pause and go do that. Okay, I hope you found a nice little story. I found that UC Berkeley is offering their Science of Happiness course for free online. So I'm going to use this as my content, or my copy anyway. So back to InDesign. Let's go to, now you're going to be familiar with this, luckily, because of Illustrator, and it works almost identically. Actually, InDesign has a lot more options when it comes to text, because you can use InDesign for creating newspapers, magazines, pamphlets, flyers, trifolds, posters, books. I mean, it does all publications. So it's very centered around paper publications and the text. It has a lot more options for text. So let's go ahead and create a nice little text box. And we're going to create a very simple sort of newspaper style layout. I'm going to go, sorry, there's a text box. I'm going to go back to my online story. Okay, I already have it highlighted, but I'll do it again. Hey, if we attend this course, can we put we attended UC Berkeley on our resumes? You might be wondering why we're not just using lorem ipsum. And that's because I want the text to sort of inspire you to create a design that fits the text. And that's actually a big design challenge. So, okay, I have enough for now. You'll notice that I copied out, or I pasted so much text that it can't fit in the box that I laid out. And so when that happens, at the bottom, there's this little plus sign. If you click that plus sign with your selection tool, I had to do it twice actually. It gives you this, and you click it somewhere and it'll lay you out another box. So that's pretty nifty. So let's see. Okay, so we have our copy. Now, the first thing I want is an illustration up here, something that says, hey, happiness. So go ahead and find an image online that sort of speaks to the content of your copy. Oh, by the way, copy is another word for text. So I'm going to go ahead and take a minute, and I'm going to do the same. So I Googled happiness, and I found lots of really great illustrations. I'm fond of this one, so I'm going to download it. I'm going to download it onto my desktop, and then I'm going to pop it into a folder, but I'm going to leave that to you. You saw the previous video that emphasized the importance of keeping all your files very well organized for an InDesign project. This is because when we send it to a printer, we need all the files to be together. And if you try to wait till the end of the project to gather them all up and put them all in the same folder, you might find, oops, I deleted one. I thought it wasn't important anymore. Or, all sorts of things can happen. Or, oh, I, saved it to a thumb drive and I didn't even move it to my desktop. And now it's like I give the thumb drive to a friend. These are things that I have done myself so many times. So I speak from experience. Create a folder, keep all your content in there. I'm just going to save it to my desktop because this is for demonstration purposes. Okay, unnamed, that's fine. But it is important to save it in InDesign because then you'll have the asset. In other programs like Photoshop or InDesign, it's kind of like a little bit more passable to copy paste. But InDesign, it'll create so many problems later. So let's just not. Now we're going to say go up to File, say Place. Place. Where are you? There it is, toward the top, middle top. We're going to go to the file wherever we saved it. Okay. Double click, place it somewhere. There she is, right? Now, here's a little word worth mentioning about the different way that images work in InDesign. And this actually, I love the way they work in InDesign. I wish they worked the same way in our other programs, such as Illustrator. Not as much Photoshop, but Illustrator, I wish. I'm going to move these down because I want this image to be over here. And we're going to make it a little bit bigger. I don't usually recommend that because it's going to come out pixelated, but for demonstration purposes, I think it's passable. Actually, let me show you the mistake I just made. I grabbed the corner and I dragged, right? And look what, I'm going to hold shift so it stays proportional. bring it all the way to the spine of the magazine and let go, and oh, the image didn't get any bigger. Well, but we're looking at this frame, right? So why didn't it get bigger? That's because images are made of two elements in InDesign. There's the frame, and then there's the actual image. You'll notice I can move this image around independently. Watch what happens when I move it to the edge of the frame. Look at that. It only shows part of it. It only shows the part that's in the frame. So it's almost like a quick mask in a way. Remember quick masks? They hide, various parts of the image. This is almost like a built-in quick mask, and you grab it by making sure to grab this little circle in the middle. If you do the other way, it's kind of hard to tell whether you're going to grab the frame or the image. But if you grab this, you'll always grab the image inside the frame. And then if you just click it, it's going to give you anchor points for the image itself. So I'm gonna grow the image all the way out to the edge of the bleed and to the spine of the magazine, right about there. And I'm going to bring it up a little bit, and there we go. If I wanted it to go a little higher though, I just moved the image up, but I didn't move the frame up, so which is fine. But for now, I want the image and the frame to basically match. It makes resizing the image really easy. That happened just now because I grabbed the image and narrowed it down, so it squished her. But if I were to grab the frame, which is blue, look at that. Isn't that easier than like cropping it and then re-importing it? Way easier. Anyway, I love that feature. I think you'll like it once you get used to it. Okay, so we have an image here. We're going to move the text down because we're going to leave a little space for copy. I mean, for a title. And let's create a new text box and create a title. So, oh, you know what? We almost forgot to change the font. So let's go with, this is Minion Pro. Our fonts up here are in this menu. Whenever we have the type tool selected, our option panel up here will be all sorts of fonty tools. This is our font. Roman. Incidentally, I mean, we could go on and on about fonts. There are some designers who really, really geek out over fonts. Me, not as much, but they are very deep. So, and each one kind of conveys a different vibe. So, I mean, you can say so much with a font without even saying anything. It's just like an image. Well, they're not just like images, but they're similar to images in that they can convey certain feelings without even saying anything. I mean, you look at this image, and you don't have to say, hey, you should look at this image and feel good. You don't have to put that in the caption to know that this should be a lighthearted image and kind of like a breath of fresh air when you see it. Same thing with fonts. If you see Times New Roman, you typically see those in like antique books, or actually, I mean, in modern books too. It has a slightly bookish and academic feel to it. If you see the font Open Sans, that's been a very popular one lately for sort of like a sleek, modern, like websites are using Open Sans like crazy. Same thing with a font called Railway. These are actually usually have to buy them and import them. No, I think Railway and Open Sans are both free, but you have to import them into Photoshop. They usually don't, I mean, Adobe, they usually don't come with it default. If you want to know how to put new fonts in InDesign and your other Adobe products, just Google it. It's actually pretty easy. You basically go to Google Fonts. There's like an open source font resource called Google Fonts. You can find lots of free fonts that are not already in your software, and then you download. It'll just download a zip file, and then you just unpack the zip file and you put it in a certain folder in your computer. So not in the Adobe folder. It's actually going to be in your computer, because Adobe products will detect what fonts you have on your computer and show them to you in the menu, and you can choose them and use them. But yeah, so that's how you do that. But I'm not going to walk you through it. It's not really part of this whole lesson. So anyway, I use Times New Roman. Now I'm going to create a little area for my title. I'm going to say Berkeley. All right. Berkeley offers free classes on how to be happy. So you typically will want a different font for your headlines or your titles than you do your text. That's convention. It kind of makes it clear to your unconscious that okay, this is a headline. I mean, if we were to just leave it the way it is. Oh yeah, and by the way, you can press W and it'll sort of give you a preview of the way the publication will look without all our guides. So that doesn't really, something's obviously wrong, right? And we do not want that to happen. We don't want to make the user think. That there's a great book about web design that is applicable in my opinion to all design, but it's called Don't Make Me Think. And if your design ever makes the user think, like, is that a headline? You've done something wrong. You don't want them to have to ask themselves anything about your design, whether it be a product, a publication, a website. It should use all conventions or all everything in its arsenal to make the user feel as comfortable and use it as intuitively as possible. I think actually I've heard filmmakers say that too. I think that's why, sadly, it's sort of a catch-22. Although filmmakers in the audience, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, like, films just tend to reinforce stereotypes, which are really terrible. But I've heard a filmmaker, defend it by saying, yes, it's terrible, but we do it because if you were to do it like a different way, then then the audience would go like, oh, it would take them out of the movie a little bit. So let's give this a different font. I just basically picked one at random. Okay, so there's a different font. I've never used this one before, but it's called Marcellus. Now I'm going to bring the font size up. So that's here. Right now it's 12 point. Remember, point is that old term from the printing days. I think a point is the length of a little printing piece they used to use, a little skinny piece of metal called a lead. Anyway, now here's where a little bit of our judgment is going to have to come in here. You'll notice that I have it at a size that I like, but offers is hyphenated, and you never want a short word to be hyphenated. It's just weird and it's too hard to read. So I'm gonna hit return on that, and there we go. That looks better. I'm still not fond of it though, so I'm gonna bring the font size down. Good. All right, now if we bring this up, I think if we bring the rest of this copy up, I think it's gonna look pretty passable. But I'm going to tell you, I'm not super fond of how far apart these lines are. So this is called line height, and it's how much space is going to be between each line. So I'm going to highlight everything, and that is right here. It's auto because every font comes with a default. But I just feel like for a title, it's just a little too spaced out. So I just took a jump down, way down. It's clearly not enough space, right? 11 points. So actually, we could bring it down to 0 points and see what happens. It's all in the same line, right? And since it's how big was the font when we stopped? I can't remember. After we were done adjusting, it was 18 points. Okay, so was it? Yeah, 18 point. So anything less than 18 should kind of have them crashing into each other. Probably not here because we don't have any letters that have anything below the base, like a G or a Y. A Y or a G would likely crash into the next line, especially if it were like a G and then a capital letter would. Anyway, so 18. Why is that T so small? Okay, that's better. I don't know how that little fella escaped. Oh, you know what? Okay, this is a weird font. I just realized. All the lower cases are what they call small caps. It just makes the capital letter smaller, like a lowercase letter. These are actually, I love fonts that use small caps because they're so much easier to read. But we can go into that later in detail if we want. But like usually you want to use small caps in headlines if somebody insists on using all caps. I typically avoid using all caps at any point. And I'll show you why. Oh, here's Open Sans, the one I was just talking about. Berkeley offers free classes on how to be happy. Okay, so people tend, after you become an experienced reader, so an 11-year-old does not read this way. An 11-year-old will look at each letter and sound it out. But over time, a 16-year-old, a 20-year-old gets used to seeing the same words again and again. And instead of reading the words, we start to recognize the shapes at a glance, much the way Chinese and other East Asian language learners recognize the characters at a glance. They're not really examining them closely or looking at the radicals and the other elements of the character. Same thing with our words. I recognize the word Berkeley because it's kind of shaped like, well, they're all kind of shaped like big blah, 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 these little noodles, but you recognize the shapes. That's how we can read fast. Now, when you do all caps, let's see what happens to that. It robs you of that, doesn't it? You actually do have to revert to the 11-year-old method of reading every single letter, every single word, sounding, even if it is fast. We are pretty fast at it as adults, but nonetheless, it's not recognizing the shapes. This is making us think a little bit, isn't it? We don't want to do that. So sometimes I've had clients, say, "Oh no, let's make the title in all caps," and I usually try to argue a little bit. I wouldn't recommend that. I know all caps seem easier to read, but they're actually not. And especially if somebody's scanning through pages very quickly, they may not want to take the time to read it. Oh yeah, but that's just the way we do it. No, okay. But if they do insist on that, fonts that use small caps are a really great sort of workaround, like Marcellus. Okay, these are all true caps, but let's write it out regularly. I'm spelling Berkeley right. That so it makes the cap smaller, so you get a little bit more of the original shape of the word. Not all of it, but more of it's back. All right. Let's go over a few. Let's choose a more normal font. I'm going to go with Open Sans actually. That's the one I mentioned that's been kind of popular over the last year or two for being kind of sleek and high tech looking. Not really fitting for this article, but let's just go with it for now. So you can highlight text and click this, and it'll go all caps. If we don't want that, this is the small caps button. So if we highlight it and click it, it should just revert to what we had with that Marcellus font. It's a superscript. So if you have like 4 squared, you can put little squared guy at the top. Same thing with the subscript. I think you use that in chemistry. Correct me if I'm wrong, chemists. Underline. So underline, I advise you to never use. It was popular back when we had typewriters because whenever we wrote science pages or science papers, we would underline because we didn't have an italic. You'd have to get a whole new typewriter to do italics, but we didn't have that, so we just underline it because underlining you could do with your typewriter. It's still around, but there's really no valid reason to use it. If you have to draw a line under a word, the InDesign gives us a line tool. We can just drop a line under it. Just like Illustrator has a line tool, and you can position it however you want, color it whatever you want. It's a better tool. So, strike through, you could make the same argument that you can bring a little line into it and strike it through if you wanted. But actually, I do use strike through sometimes because, to tell you the truth, using the strike through font is a little bit easier. And I like whenever the font does the strike through, it's always perfect. I never want to change it. I don't need that much customization with a strike through, so I use strike through. Now, kerning is the space between letters. So let's adjust the kerning. As I go up, hello? Oh, that's right. Okay, so let's choose a place between two characters. Here we go, between B and E. Let's say, let's just do something radical. Okay, so there. You can see there's a ton of space between B and E now, right? Put our cursor there again. Bring it back down to 0, and it's default. You can bring them a little closer. Actually, you can bring them super close to the point where they're squished on top of each other. There we go. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but you have the option. I find kerning useful when I have to do really slight changes to try to make various lines look good. So you're going to find that as you edit these columns, these paragraphs, sometimes it's looking really good, but there's one hyphen, and you just want to get rid of like the last word is hyphened, which would be stupid. Don't do that. So you can adjust kerning here and there, kerning, and people say both. And you can squish it in just a little bit, just imperceptibly. The reader will not notice, but paragraphs to straighten up, and then you can fit everything the right way. Let me try to find an example of some bad design here so far. We're going to run into it. There's going to be bad design. I'm going to click that plus sign because there's too much text, and boom, another column. Oh, yet another column. Pennies from heaven. Give me that. Oh, great. Okay, this is terrible, which is what we want. So let's look at this problem. So in this very last paragraph, we have one sentence, and we have the whole story here, and then this one, what we call an orphan. Just one sentence that's, wait, do we call it an orphan or do we call it a widow? I always get those two confused. Pretty sure an orphan is... All right, I Googled it. It's called an orphan. Okay. An orphan is whenever it's at the top. So if we had more paragraphs, it would just be like one sentence that belongs with the previous paragraph and then a whole new paragraph. And that doesn't look great. So we want to get this to squeeze in with the other one. So we're going to have to really adjust the rest of this copy. Let's see here. This paragraph looks really good. Well, you know what? For one, we have, this is a print publication, but we don't typically put spaces in a print publication. We usually indent instead, right? So, oops. So that's the first place to start, but you know what? We're going to have to do that to all of them. So I'm going to start with just doing that. I'm going to, create indentations and get rid of those spaces and see how it looks. All right, here we are. Oh, we got rid of the orphan. A lot better, but it's not perfect. For starters, I got rid of the space, but these indents, these indentations are really big for such narrow rows, don't you think? I mean, it's like a quarter of the whole page. We can adjust the size of the indentation manually in InDesign, and if you're writing a very big document, I highly recommend it, but we're going to skip that for now. because it's only a couple pages, and if you adjust the size, then you have to pretty much adjust it for every new project. So unless I'm working on most of my projects are like pamphlets, booklets, like, unless I'm doing like a 20-page report, which I do like about once a year, I just do this space. There we go. I don't know, space. There we go. 3 spaces. I like that. That looks good to me. It's subjective. So you do what you think looks good, and if it raises anybody else's eyebrow, in design, it's especially when you're starting out, it's difficult to have a thick skin. You feel like it's a little bit of an attack when somebody criticizes your design, but it's not. Think of it as like a market research. People tell you what they feel, and that informs you. It's like, oh, they think that looks weird. We don't want that. Don't try to like come back like, oh, I did it because of this, that. No, if somebody thinks something's weird, they're right, because you're affecting them in some way that's throwing them off. Take that info and improve your design. Because if they're saying it, then probably other people are thinking it, but not saying it. Yeah, I think that three space indentation looks pretty good. All right, so speak of the devil, here's an orphan. An orphan is whenever you have one little word or one little bit of a hyphenated word at the end of a paragraph. We typically don't want these because they there's no reason for them. You can't. It takes up a whole bunch of space here, and it creates a bunch of space, between this paragraph and the next one. It looks weird when the next paragraph is indented. Let me show you what I mean. I'll trade its place with this one. So compare this with all this stuff over here in the middle row. It's nice and dense and compact, but then this really, actually, even this put together with this creates a lot of white space, giving it a much fluffier kind of look. We don't want that. So there's a few different ways we can get around that. One is adjusting the first resort should be trying to adjust the rag. So the rag is a little slang term, just meaning like just trying to hit return here and there. No, that's bad. Let's see how it over. Oh, no, that's not good. That's bad. Might even have to just hold it in with the previous paragraph. Actually, no, that didn't do it either. And sometimes you even have to rewrite a little bit of the copy. So you got to check with your clients or your bosses before you do that. But psychology and cognitive science professor Laurie Sanders teaches the modified 6-week course, which starts misconceptions about happiness and what happens if we knowing feature of the mind that we lead it. The things that we are. Another way to deal with it is just expanding the box just slightly. Oh, that did it. Okay. And you know what? You just try to do it to the point where nobody will notice that it's a different size of a column. If it's subtle enough, nobody will notice. I don't think humans will notice that. So I think we're okay on that column. And then the last way of adjusting that, I don't like this hyphen. You want as few hyphens as possible, by the way. Oh, yeah, I like that better. No, I'm not in love with it, but it's better. And then if you had to, you could start adjusting the kerning and bringing in each little word a little bit, make it a little tighter just to try to get that word habits to kind of pop up where it should be. So let's see. Now, let's get a little deeper into this copy. So in case you haven't noticed, as I mentioned earlier, InDesign is to a great extent all about designing the text. And there's a lot more that goes into text than most people appreciate. So I realized that I probably should have thrown that at you as a preface. But yeah, we're going to be doing a lot of text. So notice that, let's see, over here we have 2 hyphens in a row. I hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it. So let's fix that. Students from around the world are watch to carefully prep a series of videos. Myself and covering the science of connection. Okay, you know what? We could probably just hit return here. Oh, creates another. Oh, you know what? And then that looks terrible. Ooh, this is going to be a tricky one. I hate that Simon Thomas. That hyphen there is terrible. Let's see. So this one, maybe we'll just merge it with the previous paragraph. See if that worked. Oh, it did. Yes. And got it. Okay, there we go. That's a little, that's a little widowish. Oh, did I say orphan earlier or widow? Like I was telling you, I always get those two confused. This should be widow. I don't know. I think it's just barely passable. I'd prefer it being more than half the column. And if it's less than half the column, usually I struggle to get it folded in. But oh, whenever you have an acronym, this is a great excuse to use small caps. Oh, you know what? The original publisher in the article I copy pasted, that actually already was small caps. So good job, whoever did the copy on that article. But small caps for acronyms are good because if you have like USSR, see how big that is? It's really and then I should have and you see how attention grabbing that is? How big it is? Now let's change that to small caps. Oh, so you know what? I noticed that sometimes if you highlight something and say small caps, it doesn't go right away. So you have to retype it USSR. Oh, it's not working. Why is that? Oh, you know what? Because I held down shift. Okay, there we go. So see, that doesn't grab as much attention. So that's a lot better. GGSC, I would prefer that be in small caps. So I'm going to say small caps and I'm going to type GGSC. Way better. Okay, now it's not like whenever you have caps, sometimes it just grabs attention and makes it feel like you're being screamed at. Now, let's just say you groom the rag, or AKA just make the columns look nice, try to get rid of any widows. Widows are the little leftover dudes at the end. Or any orphans, which are the thing that we started with, where it's like a little bit of a sentence left at the very top. Try to get rid of as many hyphens as you can because those do make it hard to read. Let's go to the front or the top. So has anybody ever seen in medieval manuscripts where we have this like one really big capital letter at the beginning of the very first paragraph? Well, we're going to do that because it's actually, it looks pretty cool, but it indicates unconsciously to the reader that this is the beginning of like the section or the story, or it's a beginning point. So let's see here. So you're going to open up your paragraphs panel or palette. That's not my paragraphs palette. That's paragraph styles. Let's see. Okay, this one's a little hidden, but you go to Window, you go to Type and Tables, and then you go to Paragraph, and that's how you make that palette pop up. So that's like the weird, like one of the few weird ones that are sort of hidden in there. Usually they're real obvious and simple, as you know, but that one's a little tricky. Okay, so let's highlight that letter that we want to do a drop cap on. Let's go over to our paragraphs. Okay, here it is. It's right here. It sort of has a little picture of a drop cap on it. We're going to go up 1, 2, 3. There we go. Not bad, right? Looks pretty good. Now, I want you to do this in the beginning of any section you have in your project for this week. So anyway, looking all right. At some point, this reverted to a different font. That's weird. I'm picking something random. Look, it has a widow in the headline. You definitely don't want a widow in the headline. You definitely don't want it hyphenated in the headline either. All right, I like that. That's about as good as it's going to get. So there we go. Okay, so Now, I want your project for this week is to do exactly what we just did here together. I want you to create a layout, put an image in here somewhere, put an image over on your next page somewhere. It's sort of extra nice if you make the images flow together. I want you to make the whole layout sort of themed around the copy that you've chosen. So if you choose a happy, like Berkeley has classes on how to be happy. I want to see some very light, happy images. You could choose a news story and just put, oh, a guy was robbed a liquor store. Now he's in jail. Put some mug shots in there. A crime scene, and then groom the copy. Make it look nice. There's a lot more to it, and if you want a recommendation on a book, there's a book by Robin Williams, not the comedian, a graphic designer named Robin Williams, and it's called the Non-Designer's Guide to Font. Non-Designer's Guide to Google it. Robin Williams, Non-Designer's Guide to, I think, Font. Maybe typesetting, but I think font. Anyway, super good book. Actually, totally geared for designers. So the title is misleading. Maybe they were trying to sell more copies, but you'd really appreciate it. And you'll obviously need more copy and more text, but I'll leave that up to you. And as long as you follow the step by step in what we've gone over today, you'll have all the tools you need to accomplish it. So I look forward to seeing what you make.